Hello, and welcome to Sunrise Gratitude Summit, a video series for better mornings. I'm Emily Silva, the author of Sunrise Gratitude, and today I'm speaking with Devin Jones. She's an international women's self-love coach, speaker, and creator of the 7-week self-love program, Sacred. Devin's work is informed by positive psychology, mystic spirituality, feminism, and conscious decolonization. Through her coaching, Devin shows women how to heal themselves, step out of self-doubt, reprogram their minds, and receive the transformational power of self-love. She teaches women how to love themselves unconditionally, live in full expression, and create a life that integrates with their soul. Devin is a Gallup certified strengths coach, a Beautiful You life coach, and has a degree from Stanford with a concentration in social development and human well-being. Welcome, Devin.
Hi, Devin. It's so good to see you today. How are you?
Hi, Emily. I'm so great. It's great to see you too.
I'm so excited to have you here. I want to give a little background on how I met you. We met, I think it was 3 years ago at San Diego Business Babes. Is that what it was called?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were the leader and you got up and spoke. And while you were speaking, I just had this message that I'm going to collaborate with you someday. I didn't know what that meant. And I remember going up to you and saying you did such a great job. I'd love to get together for coffee and collaborate sometime. And then our friendship started.
Yes, I remember that really distinctly because I don't know if I ever told you this, but I had looked at your website and seen your work before you showed up at that event. I didn't even know you were coming.
I didn't know
And
that.
yes, and I don't know why I've never shared this with you. And I was like, man, this girl has goals. I want to be like Soul's Adventures, like Emily. And then you showed up and you walked up to me after I spoke and you said, we do the same thing. Those were your words. We do the same thing. I'm a life coach too. And I was like, oh, very cool. And I just love that you were so open. I was newer to coaching and your openness to want to collaborate was very inviting and made me feel really special because I was like, man, this girl is the real deal and she wants to collaborate with me. So that was the beginning of our friendship.
Yeah, and we've collaborated on so many things. We were in Spain together last year on our own adventures, but we ended up being in the same city in Spain and also in Florence. And I just love the synchronicities in our lives and how we keep showing up.
Same. I love
So
it.
the book is Sunrise Gratitude, and it's all about creating either a sacred morning, beautiful morning, maybe even just an active morning, because some of us have a really hard time getting up in the morning. So my first question is, would you consider yourself a morning person?
I love this question as I was thinking about it. And my answer is yes, I am. But I didn't think that I was for a very long time because I had a very specific definition of what a morning person is. And I don't fit that mold.
What was that definition?
So I used to think in order to be a morning person, you have to wake up at 5 a.m., work out in the morning, be just jump out of bed, super peppy and happy. I think about the epitome of a morning person is my mother-in-law. She gets up at 5 a.m. or 4:30 every morning and bless her, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And she's super energetic, but that doesn't mean that I'm not a morning person. And actually my version might not be 5 a.m., but it's just loving those intentional mornings. And so now I do call myself a morning person, even though my day starts more 7:30. The morning is still one of my most rich and sacred parts of my day.
I think it's interesting. Every time I ask this question, everyone's day starts at a different time and we all have an idea of what time a morning person begins. But I think the key here is Grace, your morning is yours. It starts when you wake up, and 7:30 is still very early compared to some other people. So what are some key components to you to make your morning as special as possible?
So my first thing that I always do is I make my bed. My space is really important to me, and having an organized space and having a bed made just feels like the day has officially begun and I just have things where they belong. So that's really good. And then I also do breakfast and tea right away. I know not everybody likes breakfast. I've always been a breakfast person, and I feel like it's just a great way to start my my body going. And especially for me as a self-love coach, I really see nourishing myself as a huge part of my self-love practice. And I teach this to my clients, is the way that we treat our bodies with the food that we take in is a part of that. So I eat my breakfast, make tea for myself, coffee for my husband. And then after that, my morning practice begins. So it's journaling or meditating or both. And then sometimes I add in affirmations, or I will add in listening to music or even a little bit of dance. But the practice includes definitely some reflection and quiet time.
Yeah. And how long does it usually take you to get through your morning routine?
So from waking up to finishing my practice, it's probably an hour and a half.
That's a good amount of time to
Process.
give yourself in the morning.
Yeah. So I wake up at 7:30 or 8, and I don't officially start my work day until 10. That's the beauty of being able to work for myself, because I really want to reserve those 2 hours for, centering myself, grounding in what are my intentions for the day. And then once that's over, I want to get ready, put myself together, and then sit down feeling, like clear on what I want to get done for the day. And then also feeling good in myself, like I've cared for myself, pampered myself, done my hair, whatever that looks like for the day.
Yeah. So we'll get into what you're doing currently, but your coaching practice has definitely morphed over the last few years. Like I've seen you really change and mold it into something very, very beautiful. It's always been lovely. But before we start talking about what you're doing now, can you tell us a little bit about your journey to starting your own business? Because it's pretty scary, and there are a lot of people out there right now that are looking into starting their own businesses.
Yeah. So I started my own business 5 years ago, 2015, January of 2015. And it was a side hustle. It was a side gig for a while. I had been working full time as a university career coach at a private school here in San Diego. And I loved my job. I loved my day job, but I also had this spark in me that was just really curious about entrepreneurship. And as my husband and I were talking about, he was my fiance at the time, but as we were talking about what would, our lives look like, what does our dream life look like, being able to be location independent, being able to work around my family was really, really important. So that's why I was first inspired to start my side gig. So I worked in that for about 3 years, just as a side hustle, taking clients after work at 6 a.m. on lunchtime calls. And then eventually last year, I decided to dive full time into the business. That's when we left for Spain, where you and I got to meet up. So I've been full time since April of 2019, so a little over a year now. And it was definitely started as career coaching, because that was my training back then. Career and Strengths Finder, if people know that tool, is a personality assessment. And I work exclusively with women. But as I changed, and I think all of us coaches experience this, we change spiritually, emotionally, relationally, socially. And as I changed, my clients started to want to talk about more than career. So I became more of a holistic life coach. And then this year, I really stepped into my niche, what I think is my superpower, which is self-love. So I help women tap into their own self-love, learn how self-love has the power to heal past traumas, to heal current relationships, and then even to manifest and create the life that you desire. So I am a sacred self-love coach today.
And you created a beautiful program called Sacred. Can you tell us a little bit about this program?
Yeah, so it's a 7-week program that walks through 7 pillars of self-love and talk about morning practice and meditation and the importance of that. I actually was journaling one morning. I remember it was a Sunday morning, and this program hit me like a lightning bolt. It just really struck. And I was journaling about potentially making a change in my business from being holistic life and career into this self-love. And my coach gave me, a great question, a great prompt. She said to ask myself, is it fear or something else? And when I wrote that question in my journal, something else poured out, and I wrote 14 pages of what is now sacred. And the 7 pillars, so they just came barreling through me. The 7 pillars are compassion, affection, reverence, validation, trust, sovereignty, and radiance. And it was so clear, like a message from God, this is how you do it. This is how you have walked through self-love in your own life, and how you'll get to show others. So it's a group coaching and learning program. So I teach on the pillar, and then we practice that pillar in your life. And there's embodiment work as well, because I really love somatic work and making sure we include the body into the process of healing and growth. And I'm finishing up. I'm in week 6 of our first cohort, which has been really beautiful and lovely. And it's an amazing process to see women really recognize that they have been living as their own worst critic, and to heal that, and then to start living as their own best friend and seeing how self-love has the power to just make anything possible in their lives.
Yeah, and I feel like that's so important right now because we do have all this space and time
Mm-hmm.
to be in our heads, and that can not necessarily be the best thing for us. And I think the somatic part, like getting back into our bodies, into our hearts, we need our brains. They're wonderful, but they can also be our worst enemies. Can you tell us about how sacred changed your life? Because like you said, 14 pages came out. Clearly you had been through this. So do you mind sharing a little bit?
Sure. How sacred itself, or how self-love changed my life?
Self-love, to
Self-love.
become the program sacred.
Yeah. So I think one of the most powerful examples in my life is in my marriage. So I've been married for a little over 4 years now. And I didn't realize until about a year ago that self-hatred, the self-hatred that I had been living with, was potentially going to destroy my marriage, because I had such deep-seated fears of being a fraud, of being unloved, of being rejected, that I was projecting all of my own trauma and insecurities onto my husband and asking him to basically fix me by being perfect. And so when I recognized that it was actually up to me to love me, that I couldn't ask him, although he does love me so much, I couldn't ask him to be everything for me. Like, no one person can meet all of our needs. We have to learn how to meet our own needs. When I started healing my own fears, my own insecurities, my own rejection, then I could love him better, because I was so fixated on all of my own flaws that I was also looking at his. And so I was not very fun to be married to, honestly, for a while, because all I could see were the problems in myself and in him. And I was kind of making our marriage crash and burn. So as I started working on self-love, which starts with self-compassion, that's my first pillar. Compassion for myself, compassion for my old mistakes, my old screw-ups, compassion for my flaws and my humanity, the fact that I'm just a regular person, that I'm not perfect. Then I could share compassion to everybody. I used to be a very judgmental person, because we judge when we're scared. We judge when we want to control. So I would judge myself and I would judge others, because it was like an illusion of control. If I could just fix myself and become a better version of myself, then I will be lovable. And then what I learned through studying self-love and all of the practices that I now practice is that actually we have to love ourselves first, and then we'll grow and transform into the most whole, complete, happy versions of ourselves. And it feels very counterintuitive, because when you feel like there's so much wrong with you, it's very hard to accept and love yourself. But that's actually the first step.
That's beautiful and very vulnerable. And I think just knowing our backgrounds are similar with the religion, self-love is something that is taught against.
Mm-hmm.
So how did it feel for you, if you don't mind going into this, like diving into self-love, knowing that the past, that was something that we weren't supposed to even explore?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you asked that question. So one moment in my life that I will never forget is when my baby niece was born about 2.5 years ago. And I remember I got to hold her after an hour of her coming out of her mom's body. And at the time I was wrestling through a lot of my beliefs around, human nature and God and the Bible and religion. And one of the things that I was taught, and many people who grow up in evangelical Christianity are taught, is that we're born sinners, that we're born flawed. And when I held this newborn baby, it makes me emotional every time. I thought to myself, you are so good. You are wholly good. There is nothing wrong with you. And if anyone were to tell her otherwise, that she's a sinner, or that she has a sinful nature, or that she was born wrong, or she was born bad, that would just be a lie. And so holding her, it was almost like looking at myself and realizing you were born in the same way. You were born perfect. You were born without flaw. You were born without sin. And that the things that we do today, the ways that we might wrong or hurt others, as I studied more and more psychology, most of it is out of a trauma response. So for me, the huge shift came when I realized that people are innately good, and people are on different sides of, I guess, the map when you talk about that. Some people believe we're innately bad and that goodness is something we learn. I believe we're innately good, and that harm or anything that we do to others is usually a survival mechanism or just us trying to get our own needs met. So that's a huge shift that I don't think goes in accordance with a lot of religions, but for me was incredibly liberating.
And it really dives into the name of your program, Sacred, because, you know, coming from a religious background and then naming your self-love program Sacred is almost this act of religious disobedience, which I love, and also claiming, because I know you had a faith deconstruction, and it's just reclaiming your faith in God, universe. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so to see myself as sacred, to see all of us as being divine it could be sacrilegious based on your upbringing. And this is where I believe that Jesus was the Son of God in the same way I am the daughter of God. And that he was just so acutely aware of his belovedness. And that's why he was such an incredible teacher. And I believe we all have that capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And some people would throw their hands up as they hear me say this. Maybe Jesus was uniquely, created. Maybe he was a special, very special child of God. I'm still working through those beliefs. But what I come back to is, like the Bible says, we're all made in God's image, and that includes women too. A lot of us have not been told that growing up. And that's why I think we as women really have to claim our sacred identities, our divinity, our connection to God. We are all born with intuition. And I think a woman's intuition is particularly strong. You and I talk a lot about this. Right now I'm pregnant. I'm about to have a baby. And, only women have been given this gift to carry life and bring it into the world. And in that way, we are uniquely set apart and uniquely sacred. So for me, I learned that we all have divine within us, and that makes us not separate from God, but actually one with God.
I love that. That's beautiful. And if you don't mind sharing, back to Sacred, there's 7 pillars. Can you share maybe a few and how we can invite that into our everyday life?
Yes. So I'll start with the first 2 pillars. So the first pillar is compassion. And like I said about the embodiment practice, there's a practice, and actually it's an ancient Hawaiian prayer. So I thank the elders of Hawaii for gifting us this, because it is really a truly powerful practice. It's called the Ho'oponopono prayer, Ho'oponopono. And the way that you can practice it is to put your hand over your heart, and it's a self-forgiveness prayer. So you say, thank you, please forgive me, I love you, I'm sorry. And you can repeat that. And then you can start to say fewer phrases if you want. You could just say, thank you, I love you, thank you. And this one, if you really sit in silence and send those words to yourself and to your heart, it can be very, very liberating from the old traumas or old mistakes that you've been harboring against yourself. So compassion is so important, because in order for us to grow into greater levels of radiance and sovereignty, and those next levels of self-love where you really fully own who you are, you first have to forgive anything in the past that has been holding you back. So that would be the first practice.
Forgiveness is really hard.
Yeah.
Especially self-forgiveness, because forgiveness in general, but when we feel like we've done something so wrong, it's hard to say, I love you to yourself. It's hard to let go of, especially if you can't be with that person that you feel like you've harmed, or can't even be with yourself if you feel like you've harmed yourself. So how can we forgive ourselves? Do you have a journal prompt, or is it just time? What's a tool that you help your clients with forgiveness?
Yeah, I think so it does differ if it's another person or if it's yourself. there's actually maybe 3 layers. So forgiveness, if somebody else wronged you, I definitely should give that caveat of, I don't think that we are required to forgive or to reconcile with those who have hurt us. That in fact, it can be helpful to create a boundary and to maybe potentially stop relationship with someone who has hurt us, created a trauma, or repeatedly hurt us. So that's one piece that I do separate. But the self-forgiveness piece, I think, is being willing to write a new story. So there's definitely a fear about, if I forgive myself, then I will just become complacent. If I forgive myself, then I am actually condoning my behavior. And through journaling and through talking it out, you can learn to kind of tease those apart and to recognize that there's a difference between guilt and shame. That guilt is very activating. So I did something wrong, versus I am wrong. So guilt is I did something wrong. Shame is I am wrong. Yeah. Guilt can help us to repair, to make new choices in the future, to not harm ourselves or harm others. It can be a very constructive thing. Shame, when it goes into I am wrong, is actually very immobilizing and it's very paralyzing. So that's what we want to forgive around. And so through the practice of journaling, or through practicing self-forgiveness, you can go into guilt and decide, what do I do now that I am accepting that I don't like that I did this, or that didn't feel right to hurt that person? What can I do differently in the future? And that can include some action taking, like having a conversation to repair, or that can include making new decisions going forward, but it doesn't have to make it mean anything about you. And that's what we want to do, is remove the labeling that we give. Our inner critic loves to label and tell ourselves that you're bad and you're horrible and you're unlovable. A big part of the process of sacred is learning to write new stories and recognize what are the kind of, I call them the usual suspects, the usual suspect messages that go on in your head, and actually investigating whether or not those things are true.
I love that. And especially when you're rewiring your brain to remember it the way it may have actually happened, as opposed to the way that you feel that it happened. And there's a lot of grace in that exercise. What is your second pillar, and something we can do to bring that into our lives?
So my second pillar is affection. And affection is about really connecting with the inner child. So one of my favorite practices in all of self-love is the childhood photo exercise. So I've had every single woman in the group find a childhood photo. Mine is right over here on my desk. I'm 2.5 in that photo. And with the photo, it's really about holding space for that child within you. And it's really helpful to be able to see that child, because, especially if you pick a photo that you love, you're going to see a part of you that you love. And sometimes it's hard to love our today self, but a 2.5-year-old, a 5-year-old, a cute you in tutu and cowboy boots, or whatever the photo looks like, is usually quite easy to love. And when you can see that, you recognize how lovable you truly are, and that you've always been lovable. You've just been told otherwise. You've just been told that something's wrong with you, but I deeply believe that there's nothing wrong with us. We just have been living in systems and patriarchy and misogynistic world, a white supremacist world that tries to mold and shape women in ways that are not helpful. So when you go back to that child who didn't know how to live any way other than just true to herself and authentically, you realize that you're so innately lovable. And one of the things you can do, it's a 3-part journal exercise. Once you have your photo, you name 5 things you love about that child, that version of you. And then you can say to that self what you think she needs to hear. And then you can conversely ask what she wants to tell you. And 100% of the time, there's always a message. There's always something that needs to be exchanged between your adult self and your childhood self. And this begins the relationship with healing the inner child that you can do all the time. Because our inner child shows up when we're scared, when we're sad, when we're angry, and being able to witness and validate that is what's coming up. It's not actually our adult rational minds that are coming up, but it's our fearful inner child. Then we can start to heal and actually attend to the needs of that part of ourselves and show up more sovereign in our lives.
It's very interesting. I did that exercise a while back, probably when I started learning to coach. And so I have this picture of me when I'm 8 years old on the couch with a book, which you can find me today on the couch with a book. But I do that also when there are difficult people or I'm having difficult conversations with people in my life. I think of their childhood photo. So like my sisters, I have these images of them when they're 4 and 10. And then I do the same with my husband. Like if we're arguing and it just kind of seems like it's not going anywhere, I think of this 8-year-old girl on the couch and this 11-year-old boy with a basketball. And that's who's actually fighting. It's not the 30 somethings coming to the table. And so it's really helped bring the compassion and the grace, because it's like, oh, you just need to be heard, or you just need a hug, or you need to be validated.
Yep. Have you seen the installation that happened at Burning Man like 5 years ago with the adults sitting back to back? Yeah. And then the inner children just trying to touch. Like our inner children are really trying to connect, but our adult selves don't know how sometimes.
It's our minds get in the way and needing to embody.
Yeah. And all the stories, right? All the stories of this is not safe and I'm rejected and our future tripping of what can happen. But when we drop into the present moment and really realize, okay, what's going on here? I'm actually deeply scared, or I really just want love, or I just need a hug. But that's super vulnerable to go there. And we're told that vulnerability is not safe. So.
Especially when you're triggered, you're not really going to drop into vulnerability and say, I need this. But it's the practice of being able to notice the trigger and say, okay, what I'm actually asking for right now is not to be right. It's a hug or validation.
Yeah, when we can see that other person as not a threat to ourselves, but actually, as this is why I love whenever we talk about relationships, we're on the same team. When we can really see that we're on the same team, then we can drop those defenses. But it's a practice. It's a very humbling practice.
Yeah, it's a growth opportunity that brings wisdom, because every single time I go through this with anyone, I always look back later, of course, not right away. And I see, okay, I needed to go through that because the lesson provided was whatever it was. And I think that we are given the lessons we are supposed to learn, just like you were given all the things to give you the tenets or the pillars of sacred. Like you needed to go through all of those things to be able to teach this lesson to others, because I think we teach what we have to learn ourselves.
100%. I agree.
So something that you've said a couple times is embodiment, and you're really into music and dance. And I've seen you dance on Instagram stories, and you're even in your, is it your masterclass for sacred? You play a song at the end. It is so beautiful. Everyone should take her masterclass at least. Can you tell us some of your favorite songs or music or ways to move your body to really get out of our heads and into our core?
Yes. So the song that was on the masterclass is one of my favorites, either for movement or for just literally laying down and letting it wash over you. It's called In Dreams by Jagdish. Jagdish. It's like Jagdeesh. So that one is amazing. I also love the song Look Up Child by Lauren Daigle, which is definitely one that makes you want to move your body. And then lately I've been obsessed with Audrey Assad. She does beautiful, just kind of singer-songwriter, and she has a cover of the song The Middle, and she actually genders it for women. So I think it's originally written by a man, but she changes the lyrics to she, and it's just has a beautiful message. It's definitely an inner child connection song. So I love to dance and sing to those. I think singing and dancing is such a beautiful way for us to express and get things out. And I find that when my mind is really busy, I need to sometimes stop the podcast, stop the learning. I'm definitely a high input person. I love to constantly be learning, and I just need to play some music and let the rhythm help me integrate all the things that have been going on. And sometimes even it's more helpful than journaling, because like we just keep engaging the mind over and over and over. We have a bunch of floating heads. And so we have to bring the body into it. And another practice, I love that you asked the way that you asked it. I also do something called shaking meditation. So sometimes if I feel a lot of energy in my body, I'll put on a song or literally with nothing, start shaking. There are some YouTube videos you can look up if you're curious about this, but you basically just shake your whole body, and you can do small movements or big movements. I usually also include like vocalizing, like sighing or groaning or kind of throwing my hands. And it's a great way to get the movement, the energy moving through and out of your body. Because that's, if we keep the energy stuck and keep just taking in, or having emotional experiences that we don't move through our bodies, that's where we get dis-ease. So shaking it out is a huge way of releasing that.
It's like a runner's high.
Yeah.
We run so long until we find that high, but shaking, I think, sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's at first it's a little aggravating because you feel like you're losing control, but then if you go long enough, then you kind of have to go until you feel like you've settled back down. But you think about it, like this is what toddlers do and children do when they're throwing tantrums. They don't have the language yet and the cognition to explain what they're thinking and feeling, but their bodies know how to get it out. That's why they beat their fists on the floor and stuff. And we tell them, stop doing that. And probably don't want that in your house, but they are just trying to, move their bodies. And even in nature, if you look, they first learned about somatic experiencing by watching the natural world. Like a gazelle runs away from a lion. When they finally get to safety at the watering hole and they realize, they look around and like the lion's gone, they shake their whole bodies and they're able to return back to equilibrium way faster. And we go through these trauma experiences all the time, but we don't naturally have that shaking mechanism. So we have to learn to use it.
I think it's nature has so much to teach us. And when I was writing Moonlight Gratitude and Sunrise Gratitude, I always draw from nature. It's like, what's the lesson here? I don't need to come up with a new lesson. Nature's already been giving us these lessons for millennia. And it's just amazing. Just the gazelle, just thinking of that, like that in itself makes me want to go move my body, because especially when fear comes up, and fear comes up in so many different ways, especially right now, there's so much fear around and we're living in a fear-based society. We should all be shaking or moving or doing something, music, or even just going on a walk without our phones or podcasts. Back to music. Are you singing your baby lullabies yet?
I love that you asked that. So I did learn that the baby will remember a song in utero if we sing it to him long enough, and then when he arrives. So we're choosing, my husband and I each want to choose a song. I'm thinking of choosing a Spanish song, which is the Mañanitas, which is the happy birthday song in Spanish. And then I think Alex is going to choose one too. But we haven't officially started. Right now he just hears me singing Sarah Bareilles when I'm driving.
And are you reading to him?
Not yet. Just reading a lot about him.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how can people be in sacred, learn about sacred?
Yeah. So I would love for anyone who's interested to check out, go to my Instagram @_Devin Jones. Devin is DEVIN. That's where I share most of my upcoming, programs, offerings, and freebies as well. You can also check out my website, devinjones.co/sacred. That's where I outline everything that's included in the program. And I'm also going to be offering that self-love masterclass again. Right now you can purchase the recording, but if you wanted to join it live, I don't have the date on that specifically, but if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that. And I also have a free affection meditation available on my website. So it's a body scan affection meditation if you want to learn how to give your body self-love. It's a meditation that goes from head to toe and kind of sends you affection and love to each of those parts. So lots of different ways to engage, and Sacred will be opening again. September 15th is the official start date. So if you are interested, go ahead and check it out, and I'd love to have you.
And I will share all the links at the bottom of the video. So people, if they didn't write it down, they can just click on the link. I definitely took the masterclass and I highly recommend it to everyone. It's beautiful. It's just beautiful. And I think you should do it live. Don't do the recording. Be with Devin live.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite questions to ask people, and I ask myself this every day, is what are you grateful for?
Today, I'm so grateful for my health. Really grateful for my health. As I grow this baby, as this baby grows inside me, just the fact that it's working and that my body is healthy and that I just was swimming in Lake Tahoe it's just such a gift to be able to have a healthy body and to trust that it knows exactly what it's doing, which I know not everybody has that all the time. So I'm just really grateful for that.
Well, Devin, I'm really grateful for you and the vulnerability you came with today, and just sharing part of your story on, your journey to self-love, your journey out of all the fears and thoughts that you used to have, and the beautiful story about your marriage. And I'm also grateful for your friendship and just the collaborations that we've been able to have throughout the years. And I look forward to so many more. And I hope you guys check out Sacred. If not, just follow her on Instagram, because she's very inspiring and is always posting great things. So thank you so much, Devin. I really appreciated it.
Thank you, Emily. Can't wait for Sunrise Gratitude to come out.